With all the problems plaguing humanity here on Earth and continuous cuts to government programs, it's no wonder that NASA isn't the #1 priority for this country. In fact, this year, NASA only received about $17 billion in funding, an amount that far exceeds how much money Americans spend on pizza every year. But exploration and space travel are what made this country stand above the rest. And with so many exciting space discoveries happening every day because of international cooperation, now is the time that we should be working together to broaden our ability to explore the infinity of space and beyond. And it's certainly not every day that I get to speak to a real-life astronaut about the universe. Earlier, I was joined by Leroy Chiao, former NASA astronaut and commander of the International Space Station, or ISS. Chiao has been on 4 space missions, logging 229 days in space and more than half a year at the ISS. I started by asking Chiao about a Russian spacecraft that just took off yesterday for the ISS, carrying 3 astronauts that encountered a software glitch. I had him bring us up to date on the safety of the astronauts on board.
There should be no problem with the safety of the astronauts. The vehicle's in good shape, except for this glitch that caused a malfunction in the burn, so they weren't able to go and dock right after launch as they had planned, or just a few hours after launch. So instead, they reverted to what they used to do and what I did when I flew on a Soyuz, and that was to take 2 days to phase your orbit to match that of the International Space Station before approaching and docking. So it should all go smoothly. I got confirmation day before yesterday that they had done the burn correctly to go ahead and start that process, so everything's going to be fine.
Okay, great. That's really, really good to hear. And I think this story is just a prime example of how, despite the current conflict between the U.S. and Russia on Earth, there's still a strong partnership between the two countries when it comes to their respective space programs. I mean, as someone who lived on the International Space Station for more than half a year, can you speak to the level of U.S.-Russian cooperation when it comes to working on the ISS?
Oh, sure, and you know, the cooperation started back in the mid-90s, as you know, and it's you know, been beneficial to everyone, all the partners. And aboard the space station was designed to be operated with cooperation in mind, because you know, there's U.S. and Russia are the 2 major partners. There's a big, solid core of it. In fact, the heart of the station are built up by Russian modules. Of course, they were designed to work with the American modules. The Americans control most of the power, just about all the power that's generated. So it takes the coordination of the ground team and the astronauts and cosmonauts on board in order to operate that station. So no single side, if you will, could sustainably operate the station without cooperation from the other side, both on the ground and up in space.
What about other countries stepping in? Of course, NASA has become increasingly reliant on Russian rockets, and you're talking
Sure.
about the cooperation since the U.S. shuttle program ended due to budget reasons, and NASA's
Right.
only seen increased budget cuts since then. I mean, do you worry about the future of the U.S. space program, and do you think other countries might step in to become new major players when it comes to space travel?
Well, in 2003, so only 10 years ago, China became only the 3rd nation or 3rd entity in the world able to launch their own astronauts into space. And since we retired the space shuttles 2.5 years ago, now there are only 2, Russia and China. And so it makes sense to me personally that we ought to be bringing countries like China into the partnership. I had advocated for bringing them into the ISS program and certainly into future programs. Any kind of exploration programs we're talking about in the future, we should include countries like China, because they do have the capability. China is getting ready to build their own space station. They're going to launch the first module in 2018 and plan to have it complete by 2020 or 2022, depending on which level you're talking about. But we're planning to, you know, stop operations aboard the ISS in 2024. That's the plan today. I hope that we will extend that, because I would hate to see us kind of give up all the operations that are going on, you know, to other people, other countries. It'd be better to work together. The United States should lead that partnership to go explore, take the next step in exploration.
In the wake of these budget cuts, private corporations have stepped in to fill the void of space exploration. Really interesting to see, perhaps most notably the Mars One project, which seeks to colonize Mars by 2024 through a reality TV show. How realistic do you think this is, and other colonization projects are on the Red Planet?
Well, you know, we have to kind of separate it out. The commercial space encompasses a pretty wide spectrum here. So you've got the mainstream commercial space players, the people, the up-and-comers like SpaceX, and even Boeing is getting into the commercial space business, and a company called Sierra Nevada. All 3 of those companies are currently receiving assistance from NASA, both in forms of technical as well as financial. And you know, SpaceX is getting ready to launch their 4th mission to the International Space Station with cargo, and of course they're working on and as are the other two companies, the capability to send astronauts one day commercially aboard their vehicles to the ISS. So the idea is that complements the government program, which would be an exploration program, to one day get to a destination like Mars. Now, as far as Mars One goes, that goes in the other side of the spectrum. You know, all those guys have done is put up a website, and admittedly, it's a beautiful website. And to their credit, they started taking application fees, and they raised about almost $8 million just collecting $38 application fees from people who want to go colonize Mars. But they don't have any hardware, they don't have any experience in the space business, so I guess if you're, you know, you want to be on a reality show and fantasize about going to Mars on, you know, vehicles that don't exist and haven't even been designed, you know, you're a pretty far out there thinker.
Wow, thank you for cutting through that. That's hilarious. Let's move on to some of your own experiences in space. I know there's been a lot of controversy surrounding your 2005 claim that you saw a UFO while on the ISS, which of course you've since explained have been fishing boat lights. But I mean, talk about this experience as well as some of the other crazy things you must have seen while out there.
Yeah, you know, actually on my very first mission, we went up and when you're in space and you're looking into deep space and you're on the sun side of the orbit, the sunlight washes out all the starlight, so you can't see any stars, just like here on Earth. But then when you look out into deep space away from the sun, it's the darkest black you can imagine, right? And so what happens is you really lose your depth perception. You can't tell if something's close by or far away. And so I was looking out the overhead window one day up in space, and I saw what I thought was a satellite way above us, because it just looks like a little dot, you know, like a star. And if it was above us, it should be falling behind. You know, in other words, the orbit, the speed, the radial speed is going to be slower. And so, but it was keeping up with us. So this is weird. This satellite up there is kind of keeping up with us. So I called my buddy up and I said, Don, take a look at that satellite up there. It looks like it's keeping up with us. And it took us about 30 seconds to realize we were looking at a speck of dust about 3 feet from the window that was being brightly lit by the sun. You know, but we couldn't tell. It looked like maybe it was a satellite, you know, 10,000 miles above us or something like that.
That's amazing. Have you ever seen just storms brewing on Earth? And I mean, I know anyone who's seen Gravity, just the incredible view that you guys have.
Right, and Gravity, the movie Gravity did a nice job of creating the look and feel of being in space and doing a spacewalk. And so, yeah, you see all kinds of neat things on the Earth. Storms, certainly, as you say, you can see these big thunderstorms that kind of trigger. You can see them trigger each other around continents, and you know, all the neat views from the Earth, or from space, looking down at the Earth. You can see, I finally found the pyramids. It took me about 3 months to find the pyramids, but I finally found them and was able to pick out some landmarks so that I could pick them out with the naked eye, and they just look like two tiny little dots. You know, the other next times we flew over Cairo in good daylight.
Incredible. So you're talking about Gravity, and you're saying, you know, it realistically portrays at least the view. But I mean, so are you saying that it's that easy to travel from space station to space station with a fire extinguisher? No. There's plenty of technical problems with the movie.
When I went to see it, I had to take my engineer hat off and just say, you know, this is entertainment. So, but they did do their homework. You know, they made the American spacesuits look right. They used the tools they were using look right. You know, now they took liberties with other parts of the movie, including, you know, changing orbital planes, which you're not going to have nearly enough fuel to do, and using fire extinguishers and not going tumbling away somehow. But it was entertaining nonetheless.
It definitely was. Dr. Chiao, of course, I can't help but ask you about your opinion of life on other worlds. I mean, do you subscribe to the Drake equation, which concludes that there is an extremely high likelihood of intelligent life out there in the universe?
Well, I would go beyond that. I mean, the universe as we know it is infinite, so that means there are a countably infinite number of planets that can support life as we know it, and that means there has to be other life out there, other intelligent life. And so I'll take it a step further and say that I believe there is other life in the universe. What I'm doubtful on, though, is whether they have been able to visit us, you know, because the distances are so vast. How much more technologically advanced could they be that they're somehow figured out how to travel those vast distances, you know, and come and come to visit us. Now, if they had to come to visit us, why haven't they shown themselves? You know, why, you know, purportedly go and abduct cows and you know, do things like that?
Yeah, I always wonder, it's always funny that the people who experience the aliens coming to visit are always kind of in the middle of nowhere, you know, not in the cities. You know, but all these discoveries of exoplanets and all these Goldilocks planets, I mean, do you think that humanity will ever have the capacity of getting to these planets far away?
It's possible, you know, because I never say anything's impossible, and you know, it's going to take some kind of new discovery. And you know, there recently I read I didn't look into it in detail, but I read a headline in saying that there was some physics that were, you know, somebody was doing research on that opened up the possibility of having parallel universes. So that opened up the possibility of traveling through, you know, in a different way than you and I perceive right now. You know, we apply a thrust and take some time to get X, you know, number of distance over from A to B. And so it's possible you could go through, you know, interdimensional travel to travel what to us are vast, you know, big, huge distances.
Mind-blowing concept right there, Doctor. What do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are about space and space travel?
You know, it's kind of interesting because that's something that I talk to with some of my friends about sometimes is, you know, the pop culture is actually quite interested in space, right? I mean, people love space movies, they love Gravity, they love this and that, they love some of the TV shows, but they almost seem a little bit ho-hum about the actual space program that's going on, and we wonder why. You know, and part of that, I think, is that in a way we've kind of made it look easy. You know, people got used to shuttles flying, people got used to the idea of people being on the International Space Station. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know why. You know, what we can do to kind of make it more exciting, except to kind of come up with new destinations. You know, if we were going to have a plan to get over to Mars and maybe stop at the Moon, which to me is a logical place to go first. You know, to go test all your equipment, your spacesuits and habitats, things like that. I think that could get people excited again, especially if we're doing it in a very international context, which I think is the way to do it now. We've demonstrated with the International Space Station program that we can do this, that we get this coalition of former Cold War and World War II enemies together, and look what we've created. And it actually is working very well.
Exactly. I mean, you're talking about the waning interest on kind of behalf of the public on the space program. I mean, you know, I know that kids, you know, they look up and they say, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. I mean, how does it feel to kind of have the space program so neglected these days? I mean, being an astronaut yourself.
Yeah, I know. And when I was a kid, I was an 8-year-old kid when we landed on the moon, when Apollo 11 landed on the moon, and that's when I decided I wanted to try to become an astronaut. And so, yeah, I mean, it is disappointing, I think, to see that people do kind of take the space program for granted, you know, people in Congress and the public, you know, but again, it's encouraging that by and large, the American public is interested in space exploration, as shown their interest in movies like Gravity, right? And so we've got to figure out a program that the American people want to get behind and want to lead this international coalition to go and execute.
And finally, and most importantly, of course, Dr. Chiao, everyone has told me that I need to ask you, how does sex in space work?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm convinced it hasn't happened yet, and the reason I'm so convinced is because you know how guys are. If it had really happened, what guy would be able to not brag about it? And once you brag about it, everybody knows.
Good answer, Leroy Chiao, former NASA astronaut. Thank you so much for coming on.